All right, today I'm going to be talking about the translation of the Book of Mormon. So the unit of study I chose was Unit 3, and that was the unit that focused all on the Book of Mormon. This was super interesting to me because I've never really gone that in depth with the whole translation of the Book of Mormon. So on that note, I am going to be focusing on the translation of the Book of Mormon as my related major concept. The type of doctrine I feel that the translation of the Book of Mormon is supportive doctrine. I feel like the Book of Mormon itself is the core doctrine, whereas the actual translation of it is more supportive and it elaborates a lot on how the Book of Mormon was written and all that stuff. And so I found it really interesting because in my first thought, I was like, oh, it's core doctrine. Like, it's the translation of the Book of Mormon. But I think in reality, it really is the supportive doctrine around the whole idea of the Book of Mormon. So two of my related scholarly articles, both were by John Welch. One was the Book of Mormon as the keystone of the church administration, and the other one was the miraculous translation of the Book of Mormon. And both were super interesting because they talked a lot about how the Book of Mormon is the keystone of the church and how we base a lot of our practices and just most of our beliefs off the Book of Mormon and the translation of it specifically, and how miraculous and divine that truly was. Two of my talks, one was by Robert K. Dellenbach. He was a member of the 70, and his was titled The Translation Miracle of the Book of Mormon. This was given in 1995, and then my other one was Ulysses Soares, The Coming Forth of the Book of Mormon, given in April of 2020, both of which, like the scholarly articles, talked about the divine power of God and how that was used to translate the Book of Mormon, as well as the instruments used, and how much of a miracle it truly was. So two D&C sections or verses. The first section is D&C 3, 5 through 15. This is just verse 5, but it says, "Behold, you have been entrusted with these things, but how strict were your commandments, and remember also the promises which were made to you if you did not transgress them." And this was talking about how Joseph Smith, he was almost, the power to translate the Book of Mormon was almost taken away from him, which is super interesting because God literally told him to do it, but he, in his struggles, God had to be like, well, if you don't change, like, I'm going to take that power away from you, which was, I found really interesting. And the second verse was, "And you have a gift to translate the plates, and this is the first gift that I bestowed upon you, and I have commanded that you should pretend to no other gift until my purpose is fulfilled in this, for I will grant unto you no other gift until it is finished." This is D&C 5, verse 4, and it just talks about how the gift, it truly was a gift from God, that Joseph was able to translate the plates. This quote was from Oliver Cowdery. It says, "It is sufficient for my present purpose to know that such is the fact that in 1823, yes, 1823, a man with whom I have had the most intimate and personal acquaintance for almost 7 years actually discovered by the vision of God the plates from which the Book of Mormon, as much as it is disbelieved, was translated. Such in this case, though men rack their brains to invent falsehood and then waft them upon every breeze, to contrary notwithstanding." So this is kind of his testifying that Joseph really did find the plates and that he was the one that translated them. And if you read more beside this quote, it's super interesting because it just goes more in depth about what Oliver Cowdery knew about the translation. So two of my key concepts I wanted to focus on were, one, the translation of the Book of Mormon was through the gift and power of God. Joseph truly had no other way of being able to translate the Book of Mormon besides through God's power. And from this experience, Oliver Cowdery wrote, "These were days never to be forgotten, to sit under the sound of a voice dictated by the inspiration of heaven," which I think is so interesting because it's true. Like, there's no other way he could have done it besides through the inspiration of heaven. And the second concept I wanted to focus on was the actual instruments themselves. A lot of the talks and scholarly articles focused on the actual instruments, but they were sent from God as well. So one instrument called in the Book of Mormon the interpreters is better known today as the Urim and Thummim. Joseph found the interpreters buried in the hill with the plates, and it was said that they could be described as a clear pair of stones bound together with a metal rim. The Book of Mormon referred to this instrument together with its breastplate as a device kept and preserved by the hand of the Lord and handed down from generation to generation for the purpose of interpreting languages. And I think the fact that it was even like handed down for that long and from that long ago is just a testimony to me that it is from God. So my one key takeaway I have from these concepts is the idea that the Book of Mormon is in fact the keystone of our religion. The fact that it was translated through the gift and power of God and through various instruments sent from God, like there's just no way someone of his educational background could just come up with everything that we have in the Book of Mormon from Egyptian writing in the plates. Like there's no way he could have done that without a divine source.